Our guest today is very special. Her name is Beverly Hutchman. Beverly has her Bachelor of Science in Family Studies from the Corbin University. She has her Master of Arts in Counseling at Multnomah University. Beverly is a member of the AACC, American Association of Christian Counselors. It is my honor today to introduce to you Beverly Hutchman. Hi, Bev. This is really wonderful to have you here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here.
You are also affiliated with other organizations. Tell us a little about yourself.
I am a member of Psychi, which is the National Honor Society for psychologists in the United States and in the world.
That's quite an honor.
It is. It really is. I'm excited to be a part of it. And I'm a lifetime member now, which is wonderful.
You also have some very special training in certain areas. Would you share that with us?
I have a lot of special training in a lot of areas, but I have to say that the thing that I'm best at and that I know the most about is families and violence and abuse, and those last two aren't the best topics in the world, but it's necessary to understand these things so we can have a better world and happier families.
Well, maybe they're not the most exciting topics in the world, but they may be the most needed. We have extremely high statistics on violence, don't we?
We do. We do. As a matter of fact, we lost more people to domestic violence, people that were killed by significant others, than we have in the war with the Iraq-Afghanistan war. And so I think we lost like 6,800 in that time, which was from 2003 till now. And people killed by significant others is between 20 and 25,000. But if you put in children that have been killed by their families, crazy, we get to about 45,000.
Those are astonishing statistics. Frightening even.
Yes.
You know a great deal about abuse, especially child molest, don't you?
Yes.
What did you write in your writings about child molest?
I wrote, it's called About Child Sex Offenders, because I think that people need to understand child sex offenders. They're not who we often think they are. We have ideas and we have stereotypes that aren't really true, that make us really vulnerable. And because we have so much child abuse and sex abuse in our country, we really have to look at it. Pretending it's not there isn't going to make it go away.
Is it true that most often a person who sexually victimizes a child is someone that child knows?
It is. It is. And in the past, it was like stranger danger, and everybody was afraid of strangers, and there was a big national campaign to look out for strangers, and we had these ideas that there were, guys hiding behind bushes or sex offenders hiding behind bushes that were going to get you, and that's who we needed to look out for. And those people certainly do exist, but they're a really small minority. And most, I'd say, probably about, it's 90-something%. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but you could go online and look at my article and see it. But most of them are from acquaintances. And the funny thing is that after we had the stranger danger scare, then what we had was DHS and the government realizing that a lot of sex abuse took place in families. And so then we had overcompensation that way, and we still do, where every time there's sex abuse, they automatically think it's a family member, which that does happen. But the vast majority of sex abuse of children takes place by acquaintances, by the soccer coach, by the priest, by their pediatrician, by their teacher, by the neighbor. And so it's people you know, and these are people that are usually above average intelligence. Everybody likes them. They're one of us. I mean, they just fit right in, and so people don't don't see them, and they're the ones that are abusing most of the kids.
You mentioned DHS. Would you tell us what that stands for?
The Department of Human Services. And so they are the folks that go in and take children out of homes and put them into foster care, or have charges pressed against parents for molestation and things like that if there's suspicion of abuse.
Are these people who abuse children always pedophiles?
No, most of them actually are not. A pedophile is actually someone that is only sexually attracted to children that are prepubescent. And actually, most child sex abuse, and I'm going to use the term child for anybody under 18, just to make things easy. Most child sex abuse happens to kids that are right around puberty, early teens, and so that would be a hebephile, or that would be a preference for young teenage girls. Most people think of all people that molest children, which for the sake of this conversation would be anybody under 18, are pedophiles. But pedophiles are only sexually attracted to children. They're not someone that's going to ever have sex with an adult. They have no interest in adults. I mean, they might only to get access to children, but they're not interested in adults at all. And they only want children that are prepubescent. But then we have a large majority that like ephebophiles. They're called ephebophiles or hebephiles. And ephebophiles prefer young teenage boys, actually up to about 16, 17 years old sometimes. And then you have your hebephiles and that like the teenage girls. And they usually like the younger ones, but they have preferences. They'll have like an age range that's their preference. And then when the kid gets too old, then they get rid of them. You know, usually by shaming them or something to get rid of them because they passed their age preference.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah,
it's
really
horrible to abuse them to start with, but then to shame them after they've abused them.
Mm-hmm.
How cruel. That's really cruel.
Yeah, and the really sad part is that there's never a shortage of kids to take advantage of. The hardest part for them is getting rid of the kid once they're past their age of preference.
That is so sad.
And that's why they shame them, because that works real well.
And then we wonder why so many children feel so defeated.
Well, yeah, but one of the major problems with boys that are sexually offended, which is a huge number, is that they believe that they'll grow up and be an offender too. And that's a common misconception in our society, that if you are sexually molested as a child, that you will become a molester too, especially among boys. And the truth is that that's not the case, and there's statistics to prove it. So that's still in a lot of our literature today, but it's passé. It's not true.
So actually, that happens a whole lot less than one assumes. The statistics on that are low comparatively speaking.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's a nice thing to know.
Yeah. Especially because that's the main thing they worry about. And they also think that they're going to be gay now if they're a boy, because they enjoyed it, which is a problem for them, because, you know, a body is a body, and it responds to certain things. And, you know, just because it felt good doesn't mean that now you have to be gay, or you might be, you might not be.
In the children that are molested, what age group is the most vulnerable or the most often molested?
I would say early teens.
For the boys or for all the kids?
For all of them.
Early teens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there are sex offenders that will molest newborns, you know, and, well, they don't do what you think they do. I mean, they do sexually abuse them, but they don't have, you know, there's no intercourse or anything like that they're just weird, and they
go into things that you
don't want to know. There are sex offenders that prefer all the ages of kids, but yeah, most of them are early teens.
How do sex offenders get access to our children? How do they manage to have the capacity and the time and the space to actually molest our children? What's happening here?
Well, for the most part, it's because we're not paying attention, especially to our teenagers. We think, oh, well, they're teenagers. They don't want anything to do with me anymore, and we act like we don't want to be around them either, and we're not watching them, and bad things happen. A lot of times parents actually push their kids into abusive relationships without even realizing it, because they want their son to be really great on the football team, or they want their daughter to get into modeling, and they think that this person can help them, and they've taken an interest in their child, so they're constantly, oh, you should go over and spend time with this person, because they want their kid to be special, and they don't realize that they're actually handing their child over to a sex offender.
Sex offenders are pretty darn good at romancing family, aren't they?
Yes, especially for the younger victims. They always will seduce the parents first with little kids. And they'll still seduce parents for older kids too, but for the little kids, definitely. They work on the parents first. Like, oh yeah, he's so great with the kids, or she's so great with the kids. But you know, you really ought to think twice about anybody who wants to spend more time with your children than you do.
That's scary.
Mhm.
That's really scary.
But people do it all the time. They're like, oh, I have someone to watch my kid or my child, and they do that.
They think that that's a blessed break, and they don't even know what they're doing.
Mm-mm. And it can go on for years, and they don't even know.
How do these offenders, these molesters, these predators, keep these children from telling?
Oh, well, they get something against them, usually. With a lot of the younger kids, they'll tell them something like, if you tell your mommy, then, you know, I'll kill your family, or, you know, something that scares them. If you do this, you'll never get to go home again. And something real scary like that. For a little bit older kids, they use blackmail, and a lot of times with the acquaintance offenders, what they'll do is take pictures of the kids, because they sell pictures a lot.
And pornography?
And then they have pictures of the kids doing things, and the kids know they have the pictures, and now they have something on the kid that they can use against them. And other things that they do are, like, they seduce the child. They buy them a lot of gifts, they give them things, and the child starts taking those things. They feel like they owe that person something, and they feel embarrassed for wanting out. But also one of the things that they do is they'll give them drugs, alcohol, get them to do something bad with them, like look at pornography. A lot of times they show them pornography, and they watch pornography together, and now there's a secrecy. And if the offender can get them to keep this secret, you know, they've got something on them. And, you know, they got drunk together, they smoked pot together, they did drugs together. And they also know that teenagers are very sexually reactive, right? I mean, it's very easy to arouse them, so they take advantage of that, especially if they give them a little bit of alcohol to lower their inhibitions, right? And, you know, maybe some drugs, something like that, and now they've got them.
So they bury them under an avalanche of guilt and fear and threats. Is there coercion in them as well?
Oh, it's definitely coercion. Yeah. Yeah, and some of these people will work on them for years. You know, and they'll find that child's needs, exactly what they need, their emotional needs, and they're looking for kids that nobody's watching, that nobody pays attention to. And it doesn't matter what socioeconomic status you're in. If you are not paying attention to your kids, there are people out there that are. They're looking, and they're, I wonder how easy it would be.
That's frightening. So, and the statistics
it should be. It is frightening.
High.
Yeah.
How high are they? What's the ratio?
1 in 4 girls, but the statistics are actually, we think it might be even higher for boys, but they're not reported, because the girls, it's 1 in 4 girls that report it. Those are only the reported ones. Boys are far less likely to report. So it's probably higher for boys, but we don't know.
So these children, when they get old enough that the parents assume they don't need a babysitter and they can take care of themselves, and that they have more freedom, that is when these kids are the most vulnerable of all. In your article about child sex offenders, you talk about a continuum. Can you explain that some?
Yes, you have situational sex offenders, and then you have preferential sex offenders, and it's a continuum. And so your situational ones are, say, the man who's getting divorced and he's angry at his wife, and so he molests his daughter to get back at his wife. It's situational. He's angry. He wants to hurt her. Okay? That would be situational, but he may never, ever do it again later. But at that time in his life, when he's under a lot of stress, he does it. Or a situational offender will be someone who does it out of curiosity or opportunity, just because they're available, that kind of thing. But it's not like they still are attracted to adults. Whereas you got your preferential sex offender. Your preferential sex offender is usually only attracted to children, but I have to say the preferential sex offenders have paraphilias, and the reason they're called preferential is because they need a certain thing to turn them on. Okay. Now, when we're talking about children, usually it would be they're only turned on by children, right?
Right.
But also they have habits that are ritual, where they go over and over in their head certain scenes of how they're going to react if the child does this or the child does that, or what the parents suspect long before anything ever happens, so they know how they're going to react already, and they're well practiced. And so these people spend like tons of time daydreaming, and it's the ritual is part of a preferential sex offender's mode of operation. They always have ritual. And they always have to do the same thing every time they have sex in order to be gratified. And so that's why, they're called a preferential sex offender. And a preferential sex offender doesn't have to be a child molester. It can be someone that is only turned on by feet or peeping or, you see what I mean? But they have to have that thing to be turned on.
A certain preference, literally.
Mm-hmm. And it just so happens that a preferential child molester prefers children. And so it goes, so you've got this situational sex offender and you've got this preferential sex offender. But the more they do it over here, the more they move along the continuum and eventually can become a preferential sex offender. But they don't always. A lot of these situational ones never go any further. They might just do it once or twice and that's it.
So it can be like taking drugs. Some people try it, and some people become addicted to it.
Yeah.
Some people try it a couple of times, and some people
that's all they think about.
Lose their mind and their future over it.
Mm-hmm. And it's their whole life, literally, planning how they're going to make their next move. And the acquaintance child molesters normally have a lot of relationships going on at once. And I think 10 is the number that's pretty much average at a time. At a time. And that's why I said that the acquaintance molesters are the ones we really need to look out for. You've got the familial ones. But the familial ones, they'll sleep with someone in their family for years, that same person, and they usually only have that one person. But it's really damaging because it goes on for a really long time. But they're not sleeping with a whole bunch of kids. You see?
Is that always common? Because I just read a book called Do You Hear Me Now? And the author of that book was molested by her father, who also molested many children in the neighborhood.
Because was he your stepfather?
Was he your stepfather? No.
No. Okay, some of them actually are. Usually it's a stepfather or a step-parent, because women are sex offenders too. But you do have those that they have sex with people in their family, but they'll also have sex with other children in the neighborhood. But they're usually, they fit the acquaintance molester profile, but they're still classified as familial. He could be an indiscriminate sex offender.
I think basically what I'm asking is, how common is it for someone that is a familial to be also an acquaintance sex offender? Is that extremely common?
It's usually only common. It's most common if it's a step-parent, because they'll marry especially people that are inadequate sex offenders, or those that don't feel like they can get what they need Well, they'll find a woman with children, okay, and they'll marry her on purpose so they can have access to her kids. And they will not only molest her children, but they'll molest other children too in the neighborhood and stuff. And so that happens a lot, that one. But they're not, even though they're classified familial because they're family, they're really like the molester. Yeah.
But there really are a lot that are both. That are a natural biological parent molesting their children and other children, but the statistic is much lower than if they were a step-parent.
I would say that would be the indiscriminate sex offender, because there are different profiles. And those people are the ones that like to have, they like to try, they're called trisexual. And they like to try all kinds of stuff, okay? Not just with children, they probably would not be a preferential sex offender, but a situational sex offender. Because even though they might do it a lot, it's more, they don't like hold back on anything they want because they want to try it. They're very selfish people, and they're usually not very intelligent. But they will like include the kids in their swapping activities and orgies and their little games and things that they were already doing before they involved the children in those things. But that they'll also, individually molest the kids just because they want to do it. And so that I would think that would be a trisexual one, but I could be wrong. I'd have to actually meet the person.
Are there other types of sexual offenders that we should be aware of as well?
The morally indiscriminate, who I was just talking about, and the inadequate sex offenders, they're actually very dangerous.
You said inadequate sex offenders.
Yeah.
Define the concept of inadequate as you're using it here.
They don't feel like they could get a woman their own age. They feel like somehow they're not, they just can't do it. They're too shy, or they have a problem where they don't feel like they're adequate. They don't feel adequate. They might be, they might not be, but it doesn't really matter because they feel like they're not.
I see.
And so they are your snatch and grab type of guys. They're the ones that would hide behind the bushes and grab people. And that's why they're so dangerous, is because they'll go after people. And, all these MOs go for rapists, too, not just child sex offenders. All sex offenders follow these patterns. But they're the kind that will go into another neighborhood, not in their own neighborhood, and grab somebody's child and really hurt them, because these are the ones that they're violent, and often they're the ones that would kill a child because they don't want to be identified, and they feel inadequate, and or morally indiscriminate. The morally indiscriminate feels like entitlement.
Entitlement.
Yeah. That's the one I thought would be the one you were talking about, where the father was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Explain how entitlement plays a role of abuse and violence, and how that entitlement falls.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. They just think they have a right, and they can do whatever they want, and that other people are beneath them and not important. All that's important is them. Very selfish. And so how does that play a part? Well, because they don't care about anybody else, and they just take what they want.
So the concept of entitlement, they're believing that they are above their victims, and their victims are less human than they are them, and have less rights, and don't count. And they also are actually aroused by hurting them. Oh, that's terrible. Define how that is. Well, just like a person that is abusive in a marital relationship or couples, where the person gets a sense of power when they feel like they've hurt that other person, or when they can control that other person, right? I've seen it a lot in control, but I did not realize that when they were hurting that person, that it was the self-gratification to those that were entitled. So they actually enjoy hurting people. That's your sadistic
Actually, I'm going to say that is a classification. They've got their own classification because each of these MOs, what distinguishes one sex offender from another is their motivation. So I have to say that we do need to put the sadistic category in there. And your sadistic sex offender is, they can only get turned on by hurting people and pain. Now, you have to realize on the continuum these things can cross over. You don't have a pure this or a pure that usually. There's crossover. Okay? So you'll have inadequate and morally indiscriminate sadistic sex offenders. They're very dangerous.
And the percentages of the ones that are extremely dangerous, of course they're all dangerous because they can destroy a child's life no matter what, whether they do it inch by inch or all at once.
They do it differently. It's only 4% that's actually your snatch and grab, drive up in a van, drag you off, torture you and kill you. Right. But if they get you, your chances are not good. And usually they're killed within the first 24 hours. And by that time, most parents haven't even realized their kid's missing because we're not paying attention. You see?
Well, and that's a double-edged sword because a lot of times the police won't look for a child until they're gone 24 hours.
For a child, they will.
Well, if the child's a teenager and not 18, sometimes not.
Well, maybe you're right, but usually it's within the first 24 hours. So time is at a premium, and if we're paying attention, we notice our child's gone. You're right, if it was a 5-year-old, they're going to look.
Yes.
But what about our teenagers who are the main victims? Or more often victimized?
And I heard people say, well, I called the police and reported her, and they said, you report her if you haven't found her in 24 hours, she's probably with a friend. Is that common? Or do you know?
I don't know. But I know that time is of the essence. That if you think your child is missing and something's wrong, you've got to report it right away because they've got to get on it immediately. That's, if you want to find them alive.
There should be more education done, not just with the public, but with our police force and our law enforcement so that they understand the MO. Is there a teaching that goes?
There is. They do have training for police officers, but police departments are kind of like schools and colleges and stuff like that, where they have in-service trainings, right? They have someone come in, they teach them.
Right.
But it's kind of a grab bag of what you get. So they may get that training, they may not.
In other words, they get some training, but you don't know which one they're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah. And they might get some of it and miss other parts and stuff like that.
When you look out across the people that are preferential offenders, the seductive ones, the introverts, the sadistic, the diverse, and you look across the populace, if you could say to the parents out there one thing that would really help them protect their children, is there one thing or set of statements that you could give them as a guideline to protect their children?
Yeah, be there. Pay attention to what they're doing. Just because they're a teenager, and I don't care what they say, does not mean they don't want you paying attention and don't want you in their life. They actually need you then more than ever, and not just because of sex abuse. So we need to be there for our kids. We need to know where they are, whether they like it or not.